All right. Welcome everyone to another business meeting of the University Philosophical Society's 341st session. I call on the registrar to read the minutes of the last part of the business meeting. Here.
Thank you. Díomh harda agus fáilte go dí an Phil. Hello and welcome to the Phil. You're all very welcome and we're quite honoured you have decided to spend your Thursday evening with us. This week, on Tuesday, we welcomed rising Irish singer, rapper and songwriter Jessica Smith, otherwise known as Big Pig. On the same day, our Bram Stoker subcommittee released the second episode of Bramcast on Spotify with Palestinian filmmaker Jordan Bryan, in which they discuss his plans of a documentary in Gaza. The deadline for the Bram Stoker Festival Paper Competition is next week, Friday the 18th of October. There's a €100 prize. €100. It's a lot of money. The final three winners will be read at a live event in Chamber on the 2nd of November, and you can find more information at Bram Stoker Club on Instagram for more details. This past Wednesday, Ireland's first gold medalist in Olympic gymnastics, Rhys McGlenaghan, who took home gold for Ireland in 2024, backflipped into Chamber, not literally. On this day next week, the House will be proposing that it regrets the rise of OnlyFans. We would like to stress it will be one of our more serious debates given the sensitive nature of the topic. We ask everyone to be respectful of all speakers involved, but of course, as always, we encourage all to attend. At this debate, we will have a scholar of gender and sexuality studies, Dr. Ruth Karras, joining us. We will have guests with personal experience in the adult entertainment industry as well. All right, enough of this seriousness. Let's discuss the future President of Ireland. Tonight, we will hear a variety of perspectives and opinions, and with that, the minutes are concluded and we can prepare for the debate to begin. Thank you.
Madam Treasurer, are there any fines?
There are no fines.
Madam Secretary, are there reports to be read?
There are no reports to be read.
The time for questions is now open.
Madam Secretary, are there any motions on notice?
There are no motions on notice.
Are there any motions not on notice?
There are no motions not on notice.
The time for questions is now closed.
Any general business? With that being closed, we conclude this private business meeting, and I call on the Secretary to bring in tonight's speakers. Here. I call this House to order and call on the registrar to lead the last minutes of last week's public business meeting. Here.
There's actually no motion before the House tonight. This begs the question, what are we doing here? Our speakers will be discussing the candidates of the upcoming election of Uachtarán, or President of Ireland, for any of you ordinary level Irish students out there. Jim Gavin asked for €3,300 to speak in this debate. Unfortunately, we had to tell him we don't have the funds. We simply cannot afford that. And it's also a very stressful time for his family. He only decided to withdraw after the Phil spent €50 printing the posters with his face on it. Another debt he has to pay. Under the President Election Act of 1993, a nominated candidate cannot actually withdraw. Jim Gavin has merely stopped campaigning and asking people for the vote. He might not be here tonight, but rest assured he's still on the ballot. Tonight we have an eclectic range of speakers. We have speaking first Dr. Sarah Fuller-McQuillan, a law professor at UCD and expert in tort, constitutional and English public law. Next, we have Fionn Graham, hailing from Dalkey, a graduate of Blackrock College, currently a law student here at Trinity, representing those without a voice. And, of course, our very own registrar here at the Phil. Next, we have TD and Labour Party leader Ivana Bacik, representing Catherine Connelly. She was also the former SU president of Trinity College Dublin. Woo! Connelly can't be here. She's been recruited by Real Madrid after exhibiting extreme talent in the sport. Throw it at me. At me. Oh man, sorry. That is a talent I do not share with her good self. Next we have Paula Butterly, a TD from County Louth, here representing for Heather Humphries. And next speaking we have Leon Tolentino, who is a member of People Before Profit, as well as first-year master's student of teaching. So a round of applause for those. And finally, we have Harvey Callahan, our very own Phil Council member on Team DC. Woo! If you haven't noticed already, Harvey is dressed up as no other than US President Donald Trump. Funnily enough, Heather Humphries has come under fire for her comments concerning Trump. Humphries described herself as a huge fan of the entire organisation, saying it has changed the culture for the better. Of course, Humphries has since apologised for the comments, clarifying that she thought she had been asked about a different orange man. Anyway, it is a real sad day for the parish. We must say goodbye to Michael D. Higgins, an old woman of a man, a real voice and conscience of the people, a poet, an artist, and a truly kind soul. A credit to his mother. Shine, that's it. Gurmil Ma'agav, and enjoy the debate. Thank you.
Welcome everyone to the University Philosophical Society and to our inaugural Uachtarán debate. Standing orders are as follows. Speeches are 7 minutes long and 10 minutes for guest speakers, and each speaker will come up and speak for their proposed candidate. At the first and last minute of every speech, you'll hear a bell. At that point, time for points of information are open. We prioritise dignity and respect at all of our debates, and if you hear anything that you don't like, our SMC Rossa Bolger is in the back and will be here all night. You can speak to him. Alternatively, I can be reached at president@tcdphil, and if you hear anything you like over this evening, you can say slay or you're here. And if you hear anything you dislike, you can shout shame. With that being said, I'd like to call on Dr. McQuillan to begin the debate. Here.
Good evening, everyone. It's my great pleasure to open this very important event on the upcoming presidential elections. My sincere congratulations to the committee on hosting this event this evening. Really important to have this sort of forum for students and everyone else alike. As someone who spent 7 years studying here throughout my undergraduate law degree and my PhD, with, of course, Ivana as my lecturer, like many of you, my favourite lecturer, of course. I now work at UCD, so I defected to an equally wonderful university. But I'm delighted to be welcomed back with open arms by the Phil. It's a really wonderful time. And this openness of mind demonstrated by the committee, this desire for unity and concord with potentially opposing entities, and the diplomacy demonstrated in seeking to achieve a common good by asking someone from UCD to come here, are all qualities that our Constitution strives to uphold. And whomever is successful in becoming our president, we hope that they will continue to strive for those same sort of values. The role of president, as you all know, is very different from the role of politicians, consistent with the different powers that they have, consistent with the different mechanisms they can use to effect change. Our president is directly elected, yet our president has relatively weak powers. Not the weakest powers in the world, but relatively weak. But the president's soft power shouldn't be underestimated. And it's in this area of soft power that perhaps we're going to see the strengths and weaknesses exposed of any potential president. For that reason, as we prepare to hear from both supporters of the two candidates and our student activists, I will address two misconceptions that abound about the constitutional role of the President. The first is that our President has strong powers regarding legislation, for example, and so that they can effect significant change. So a lot of media commentary has been around the potential for presidential candidates to effect a lot of change through legislation. The misconception at the other extreme is that, as I said, we have a relatively weak presidency in terms of the President's powers, despite being directly elected. Harry McGee wrote in the Irish Times in 2022, referencing this misconception. He said, "In theory, they have parallel constraints to those of the doomed young man in Seamus Heaney's Station Island, a clerical student home for the summer, doomed to the decent thing, visiting neighbours, drinking tea, and praising homemade bread." As with most extremes, the truth obviously lies somewhere in the middle. It's important to tease out these misconceptions now so that we might better understand what it is that any candidate can actually hope to achieve and the mechanisms by which they can actually effect change versus what their campaign might appear to promise. In doing so, hopefully we can assess better each candidate's strengths or weaknesses in the context of what they can lawfully achieve under our Constitution. So I'm going to focus on the two presidential roles that counter those two misconceptions that I mentioned. So first is the rather limited mechanism around signing legislation into law, or indeed refusing to sign legislation into law. And second, the more expansive ability of the President to communicate outside the bounds of government approval. What becomes apparent in both roles is that we do have democratic safeguards every step of the way, at least ostensibly. So looking to the first, the mechanisms around legislation. So the President does have discretion in referring legislation to the Supreme Court to assess its constitutionality, but only once it has been passed by both houses of the Oireachtas and then before the President signs it into law. The President does have sole discretion to do this, so it's at the President's discretion without the approval of the government, but they do have to consult with the Council of State. That's comprised of the Taoiseach, the Taoiseach, the Chief Justice, the President of the Court of Appeal, the President of the High Court, the Ceann Comhairle of the Dáil, the Seanad Cathaoirleach, the Attorney General, every living former President, Taoiseach and Chief Justice who's alive and available to come to the Council of State, and any other members who are appointed by the President. If the Supreme Court deems the legislation to be constitutional after they've heard the arguments, the President must sign it into law. This mechanism of referring a bill or a piece of legislation to the Supreme Court to check its constitutionality has only been done 16 times since 1983. If the bill, or even part of the bill, even a small part of the bill, is deemed to be unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, the bill in its entirety is struck down. There's been lots of different criticisms and praise for this procedure, so a lot of other countries wouldn't necessarily have this power to refer legislation in the way that our President does. But a criticism of it is that the constitutionality of a bill is tested completely in the abstract. So there's no evidence brought before the court. It's not like a normal piece of challenging or a normal claim challenging the constitutionality of legislation, because it's not asking how it impacts on any one individual. It's asking in the abstract, is this piece of legislation constitutional, and is there anything within it that might be unconstitutional? What that means is there's plenty of scope, more so than when an individual brings a case, for the Supreme Court to find parts of it unconstitutional. A further criticism is that if it's deemed constitutional by the Supreme Court, the legislation is actually further immune from further challenge on the basis of constitutionality in the courts, and something President Higgins has commented on, why he's reluctant to use that Article 26 mechanism. Under Article 27 of the Constitution, the President does hold a power that has thus far never been utilised in the history of the state. So on matters of national importance, the President can refuse to sign a bill only if a majority of the Seanad and 1/3 of the Dáil petition the President not to sign it because they feel that the will of the public should be determined. So they feel that a bill should go to a referendum and they can ask the President not to sign a bill on that basis. Again, though, the President has to consult with the Council of State in deciding whether or not to sign the bill, and if the President refuses to sign the bill, it's then put to a referendum. Outside of that, the President can't simply refuse to sign a bill into law. The Presidential Commission, if a President did decide to do that, the Presidential Commission would be formed and they would fulfil the President's obligations instead. So that's the facts, constitutional rules and principles around what a President can do around legislation. Then moving on to the second misconception. So there's a fear again that we have a relatively weak presidency or presidential powers, but actually there's a lot of soft power there for a president to speak on issues that they may feel are important or that they may feel that our country isn't doing as well as they should be. So they don't have to be, presidents don't have to be neutral in their opinions, they don't have to be apolitical, they also don't have to support the view of the current government. There's some exceptions, so making an address to the nation has to be approved by the government. That's only been exercised on 2 occasions in the history of the state, including after the 9/11 attacks with President McAleese, as does making an address to the houses of the Oireachtas. So that's only been exercised on 4 occasions. But other avenues of communication don't have this sort of extra check on them. So although in technical terms the Irish President's powers are soft, we shouldn't underestimate the impact that this soft power can have both home and abroad. There has been a tendency for Irish presidents to be quite minimalist in their roles, to be reluctant to expand beyond maybe what the government of the day is saying or what the majority of people are saying. But that has been changing over the years, kind of starting with President Robinson. So it's not the case that it's irrelevant who becomes the President of Ireland because they have these relatively weak powers. There is certainly scope for individual personality and individual viewpoints to influence the course of events. A president might afford to speak more openly about socio-economic issues, for example, or social issues than other members of the government might, particularly where these involve something like socio-economic rights, so human or constitutional rights that ensure the dignity and well-being of individuals, like healthcare, education and housing. And in a country with such strong individual constitutional rights as we have, I see our President as a sort of a beacon of the Constitution. So the Constitution can be viewed as a living document that can be developed and adapted for the ages, drafted, of course, by the founders of the state, but can be adapted over time, provides for protection of rights, the democratic structures of our state, the enduring hope of a nation that all citizens will be treated with the foundational values of dignity, equality and justice. So I would like to think that the President, who can afford to be above politics, even if constitutionally they're not required to be, is one of the foremost reminders, nationally and internationally, of what our Constitution strives for. So examples of the 3 most recent Presidents of Ireland making use of this soft power for the betterment of our diplomatic relations between Britain and Ireland began with President Robinson leading the way with visits to Britain, having to persuade the then Taoiseach to do so, and that's continued with the very memorable corresponding visits between the Queen and our Presidents. I'll finish up now with something about our preamble to the Constitution, because I think there's no other way we can sum it up better. We seek to promote the common good with due observance of prudence, justice and charity, so the dignity and freedom of the individual may be assured, true social order attained, the unity of our country restored and concord established with other nations. Thank you very much.
For the very fine speech, and call on Fionn Graham to continue the debate. Here.
Mary McAleese said in her inaugural speech, "I am honoured and humbled to be successor to 7 exemplary presidents. Their differing religions, political, geographical and social origins speak loudly of a presidency which has always been wide-opening and all-embracing. Leading candidate Catherine Connelly is a woman of open arms, certainly. She gave a small administrative role in the Dáil to a lady named Ursula who cared very deeply about the Irish language and had just taken a wrong turn in her life. Poor Ursula spent 4.5 years in prison. God love her. What did she get caught for? Well, Ursula had only been found disguised in a white van in possession of 2 handguns, petrol, black pillowcases and cable ties. is no justice in this country. I've always felt if there was one thing we need to be more open about in the Dáil, it's cable ties. Hearing about Connelly's kind-hearted nature, Heather Humphries went bright orange, I mean red. Now, I don't think politics should involve people's family life. The fact that her father and her husband were members of the Orange Order during the Troubles, I mean, who cares? And so what if she had proudly alluded to her grandfather's signing of the Ulster Covenant after being Minister of the Gaeltacht? Out of 3 candidates, only one has dropped out of the race. Jim Gavin owed a previous tenant €3,300, which had been accidentally overpaid 15 years ago. He chose a bad moment in Irish history to be a bad landlord, but at least it's made the line we draw very clear, okay? It appears now, as a presidential candidate, there are very few rules you must follow. You can give violent ex-convicts jobs in Leinster House. You can be closely tied to the sectarian Orange Order, but the one thing you can't be is a standard Fianna Fáiler. So on one side we have connections with green-blooded, cable-tie Republicans. On the other side, we have a close associate of the Orange Order, and in the middle, we have Fianna Fáil's blank dreams. Finally, a ballot that reflects our flag. In response to Catherine Connelly's, in response to her apparent fluency as Gaeilge, Heather Humphries has jumped in to try and compete within, in her own words, a cúpla focal, okay? But I ask everyone in this room, do not be fooled by Pelador merchants and cúpla focal aficionados. People have been yapping on about the issue of performative males, making jokes. It's been said more times than Mary Lewis pleaded the fifth. But it's not a real threat. I'm going to do a little demonstration about the actual danger, okay? I'm going to show you just how close you two are to becoming a performative Irish person, okay? I'm going to ask you to look at this flattering, okay? Look very closely, please, okay? Closer. United Irishman flag, thank you very much. Okay, now you. Now, I'm going to ask you, okay? I'm going to ask you to look at Oliver Cromwell. That's a trick question, he's down there deep in hell, okay? Oh, the pan-Celtic flag, okay? Now, ask me my favourite book, please, sir. Ask me my favourite book. Michael D. Higgins, Power to the People, The Hot Press. Now I'm going to ask you, Doctor, please open the front page. What do you see? Next page, please. What do you see?
The signature?
Michael Collins' signature, thank you very much. Michael D. Higgins, because that, both good guys, that is what Michael Collins fought for, okay? These are the values we need to cling to as we choose to elect our next president of this country. I warn you that this debate will be closed by probably the most racist, misogynistic person ever to speak in this chamber. And today he's dressed as Donald Trump as well. Harvey. In the meantime, as the debate goes on, I ask you to hold your country dear to your heart. Ganairi an Tálamh agus Gurb Míle. Thank you.
For the very fine speech. I call on allowed to continue the debate here.
Well, follow that. Gur maithagah agus gur maithagah go léir tá áthas arm bheith arás an seo Gláiste na Tróide mar cheanara fartí an lucht ibre. I'm delighted to be back in Trinity, in the Phil, in the GMB, where I had the pleasure of speaking on many occasions as a student, as president of Trinity Students' Union, and of course during the 25 years I spent teaching law here, criminal law and criminology, and some star students, notably of course Sarah, who is one of my great graduates, and thank you so much Sarah for acknowledging that. It was an absolute pleasure to teach here for so long. So it's great to be back here, but great also to be back in my newish role as leader of the Labour Party, also very importantly as your local TD. So for those of you living in Dublin Bay South, I also represent you in the Dáil as your local Teachta Dála. So I'm delighted to be here, and I see that the standards of humour and oratory in the Phil, are as high as ever, ish. And in particular, the previous speaker. Now, what to say about the previous speaker? Well, Fionn, if that is your name, I agreed with you on 2 things you said, and I couldn't understand anything else you said. So I think we're probably on the same side, but we're opposing. What you said was, that I agreed with, Catherine Connelly is the leading candidate. And yes, she is. And I'm really proud to be standing here in her place as her representative tonight, to speak for Catherine, to speak about why I'm supporting Catherine, why I think all of you should support Catherine and vote for her number 1 on the 24th of October. And that is going to be the bulk of my speech. And I hope it'll be a little less obscure and involve a few less flags than Fionn's speech. But the second thing Fionn said that I also really agree with, I think it was a great point, thank you Fionn, was the point that the sides are clear. That since Jim Gavin and the whole 3,300 debacle, and for anyone who hasn't listened to the Crime World podcast with the tenant, as he is now known, please do listen to it. It makes for some great listening, especially for any of you who have a landlord with whom you have disagreements. I think you will identify with the tenant, for that is his name. But now that Jim Gavin has withdrawn, God, I forgot his name from him. That things move fast in politics. Now that Jim Gavin has withdrawn, it is a race in which we do have a very clear choice, a very stark choice, I would say, between right and between left. Right on my left and left on my right. No, Catherine Connelly obviously standing for the left. Heather Humphries for the right in politics, broadly speaking. And in Irish politics, of course, we've often had a much more fragmented system. But for many of us, those of us who are clearly and proudly on the left, this does mean the lines are drawn very clearly. And that's one of the key reasons I'm supporting Catherine. And I suppose if you're asking me to distill down in the 3 seconds, three reasons. And I'm canvassing for Catherine all the time. I'm canvassing for her on Dart stations and Lewis stations and on knocking on doors and so on. And I just want to give a shout out to Trinity Labour who are here, Trinity Soc Dems who are here, Trinity Greens who are here, Trinity PPP who are here, and Trinity Sinn Féin, all of whom have been out canvassing. But we're canvassing across the country, and as we do it, we have to give that quick pitch. Why are you supporting Catherine? 3 reasons. OK, here we are. First, uniquely qualified. First woman last Count Corl of the Dáil, a position she held with great distinction and dignity for 4.5 years. That's when I got to know her first, between 2020 and 2024. First woman elected in a huge surprise upset to the government parties. That's the first reason. Second reason, because of her values, because she has stood firm for those who are disadvantaged in Irish society, for repeal of the 8th Amendment in 2018, an issue really close to my heart, because I was threatened with prison as a Students' Union president in Trinity for giving information on abortion to women in crisis pregnancy. Catherine stood for repeal in 2018, she stood for LGBT rights and marriage equality in 2015, and she has stood up for the disadvantaged in Irish society on every occasion where there has been an issue, from the Chewham babies case, on the mother and baby homes cases, for those who are looking for rights of information as adoptees, and most recently, she has been an outstanding champion and voice for the people of Gaza as they have undergone what has been a horrific genocide at the hands of Israel over the last 2 years. So, Catherine has been outstanding on those issues. And thirdly, what's the third reason? Well, she's united the left. Well, that's an extraordinary achievement in any political system. And I speak as a leader of a left party. And even within our own party, it's hard to unite us. So there you are. We're not unique. But in Irish politics, to see a candidate like Catherine come forward, who has now got Labour, Soc Dems, Sinn Féin, PBP, Green Party and Left Independents all backing her, that is a remarkable achievement. So for me, for our party, for the Labour Party, which is a party with a proud tradition, the oldest political party in the state, the political wing of the trade union movement, the Irish wing of the Party of European Socialists. For us, we're so proud to support Catherine because we see her as the standard bearer of the left, as somebody who conveys an alternative vision of politics, a vision of an active state that will deliver on housing, the biggest issue for your generation and for every generation, will deliver on housing, on care, on healthcare, on childcare and education, and on climate action. So Catherine stands for that vision of politics, and it's in stark contrast to the politics of the past, the politics of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, with all due respect to Paula, who, by the way, is a great new TD for Louth, and a colleague of my own Labour comrade, Jed Nash. But they do represent the politics of the past. They're the centre-right. Look at Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and their European groupings to get the sense of where Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael stand ideologically in a European and an international context. And you will see there is a contrast. We offer on the left an alternative vision. I have huge differences with some of the other parties in that coalition, in that alliance backing Catherine. But we have come together because fundamentally we believe in an alternative vision of the state and an alternative vision of politics. And that is a unique qualification Catherine has, that she has united so many disparate parties and individuals behind her campaign. So why else should you support Catherine? You heard a point there about her employment, her hiring of a woman, a youngish woman who had served a term of sentence. Can I offer you this point? That's one reason to support Catherine. Why? Because she believes in second chances. She believes in rehabilitation. I taught penal reform. I taught criminology here for many years. I practiced as a criminal defence barrister for 14 years. And I represented people on heinous charges before the Special Criminal Court. I have no truck with their ideology, with the ideology of many of the people I represented. But each one of them deserved legal representation under the cab rank rule that all independent barristers must abide by, our ethical rule. You take a case if it's within your competence and there's no conflict of interest, and you don't pick and choose or be judgmental about your clients. And when your clients are convicted, as some of mine were, despite my best attempts to defend, if somebody is convicted, if they've served their sentence, if they're released, and we do have to release people, we can't keep them in jail forever. We're not that society, we're not Trumpian, with all due respect, Harvey. Well, then people deserve a second chance, and we have to offer them rehabilitation. So I'm proud of Catherine's record on standing on penal reform and standing on second chance. That's one reason to vote for it. Can I offer you a few more? And some of them may be things you didn't know about Catherine. You know she's great at keepy-uppies, right? You've all seen that video, which my own kids tell me has gone viral. They don't allow me to look at TikTok, but I hear it's gone viral on TikTok. So, she's also a very good distance swimmer, a runner. Now, that might be, well, why would I vote for her on that basis? Okay, fair enough. But it's something you didn't know. Sorry, I was trying to make that, yeah. All right, leave that one aside. She is a fluent and beautiful Gaeilgeoir. Her use of the Irish language, I think, Paula will agree, I think we can agree on that. When she speaks Os Gaeilge in the chamber, in the Dáil chamber, her speaking is beautiful, it's understandable. I always thought she was a native speaker because she grew up in Connemara. She's one of 14 children. Her father was a curragh builder. I assumed she grew up in an Irish-speaking household. But I chaired a meeting recently with her. Does that mean I have 1 minute left? Okay, I have so much more to say. She grew up in this household, but it was English-speaking. And she revealed at a meeting I chaired recently in Harold's Cross, that some of you were all here, some of you were in attendance at, she revealed that she is a self-taught Irish language speaker. She went back to school as an adult and learned Irish. And I thought, well, that is really impressive. And she believes in the Irish language. And it's a key reason why I think she would make a great president. Okay, I have very little time left, so I'm going to just finish by saying, why, therefore, should you vote for Catherine? Well, for me, as a Labour Party leader, I'm so proud of having delivered. The only left-wing presidents we've ever had have been Labour presidents, Mary Robinson and Michael D. Higgins. I was proud to canvass for all of them. For Michael D. Higgins, I canvassed as a student in the late 80s when he was running for a TD. I canvassed for him as president. Michael D. was not going to win the election in 2011 until the last week. The momentum was with a different candidate. So we can take nothing for granted. Catherine is a leading candidate right now. Her keepy-uppies alone have put her in the lead. Well, maybe not just the keepy-uppies, but everything else. But things can change. Things can change in the last week. So can I offer you this by way of conclusion? That Catherine is the candidate who will continue the vision of Michael D. Higgins, of Mary Robinson, that alternative vision of an active state, that vision of a united left, a vision of an alternative left-led government after the next election. That's what we're looking to deliver with Catherine. And if you want to join us, if you want to join Catherine's campaign across the country, I'm the convener of Dublin Bay South for Catherine Connelly. It's a cross-party grouping. Please come and join us. We're out canvassing every day. We're dropping leaflets. We're putting up posters. We're wearing badges. And we believe Catherine would be the best candidate. She is the outstanding candidate. And I would really welcome your number one for her on 24th October. Gurmagh Gael.
very fine speech and call on Paul Buttery to continue the debate. Here.
Good evening, everybody. When I was asked to attend this evening, I didn't know what to expect. I certainly didn't expect that. But I have to admit, I could have gone on listening another minute or two. I really don't know where to start when I want to describe Heather Humphries. Because when I think of Heather in two phases. The Heather I know and the Heather that you see when you see her on the television and on the radio. And they're two very different Heathers. And I think that's very much due to her background, her essence, her personality. But before I give you an insight into Heather and what I know to be Heather, let's take a look at what she's promising if she were to be elected president. She talks about unity, community and opportunity. You know, that's just peachy. You know, lovely words on a flyer. But behind those words, let's delve a little further. Unity. All of you know that Heather has come from a border county, Cavan, and she grew up not applying fake orange tan, but she grew up in a Presbyterian household, which in its very essence, in being in the southern part of Ireland, was very difficult in the times that she lived in and continued to be difficult as she grew up. But yet, when she talks about her hometown, she talks about a community that was always together, that always helped each other, irrespective of their differences and irrespective of their religion. And when it came to the 1916 commemorations, many of you mightn't have remembered, but there was a lot of fear and trepidation as to what this could mean, because we were harking back to a time that not even I or Ivana remembers. And we were very fearful that we wouldn't bring people together to commemorate, but we could, in fact, open old wounds and perhaps not let them heal properly. And yet, a woman from Cavan, from a Presbyterian background, put her heart and soul into these commemorations. And there's not one person that was worked alongside her said that the sense and the spirit of what was trying to be achieved was actually achieved. And that was done by Heather, led by Heather, helped by many. And that cannot be forgotten, because it also was the basis by which we were able to move forward and start different discussions. Now let's talk about unity. There's a conversation that must begin. It begins, it stops and it starts every now and again. Sometimes it's more trendy, other times it's not even on the agenda. But the reality is it's a conversation that must begin. It must begin in earnest. And who better placed to begin that conversation but our president? We've had Mary McAleese, who did marvellous things. We've had Mary Robinson, while not talking necessarily about a peace process, but was uniting Manana Heron. Mary McAleese did everything to start a conversation to bring the communities together, both north and south. Heather is somebody that can continue that conversation, and she is uniquely placed. She has spoken about how others take day trips, and she has actually done quite the opposite. She has made it her lifetime, engaging with the communities, not just when she was a minister, not just when she was a politician, but also well before she started in political life. And she has continued to do that, and she will continue to do that, irrespective of whether she becomes president or not, because that's in her character. Her character is here to unite people. But it's not just Northern Ireland that we need to unite. We need to unite the Irish people as a whole. We're in very difficult times at the moment, and we're going through a process where many communities are divided. They're divided over immigration. They're divided over who should have what. And that's not the way forward. The way forward is through discussion, discourse, diplomacy, going into the communities and reaching out a hand, even to your foes. because very often it's easy to be friends, but very often it's so hard to reach out to somebody who instinctively you mightn't even like, you mightn't even respect their values. But Heather can. Heather can reach out and speak to these people and find common ground and find consensus. So not only when she talks about unity, it's not just the North and South divide. She's talking about bringing communities who are divided back together. She also talks about the youth. Now, her kicky-uppies aren't great. In actual fact, I don't think she can kick a ball at all. And do not try to throw that ball in my direction, okay? I'm not doing it, though I have a great flick. But when she talks, I've lost my train of thought now. I was just thinking football, and I was there going, oh God, have I got a GAA thing? And I don't. I don't have any jokes about GAA. But while her kicky-uppies aren't great, she has great belief in youth. And indeed, when they talk about the Council of State, one of her main objectives is to bring in a Youth Council of State, because I can stand here and talk and preach and talk about politics all day, but the future is yours. I've had my life, I've had a great life, I'll hopefully have a very long life, but it is you, each one of you here in the room, and the generations coming behind you, that really is the voice of the future. So when she says she wants to bring together a Council of State for the youth to listen to their voices, I believe her, because I've known her, I've interacted with her, I've walked the streets and campaigned with her, I've seen her prior to wanting to be a presidential candidate, how she interacts with youth groups, children and students alike. And I see her sincere belief when she listens. She listens and she takes on board what you are saying. And I believe that's a fundamental role for a president. President has to listen. It's very good to get up on your soapbox and to espouse what your beliefs are. But I think it's more important to get off your soapbox and listen to what people want. I believe there's a lot of things that unite us as women rather than divide us. And Ivana, you spoke about the left and the right. Now, I would say we're not that to the right. You might be way to the left, but we're not that to the right. However, you know, Heather was there when it was the repeal the 8th. Heather was there for the marriage equality. Very often women come together and support each other in very difficult circumstances. And Heather's voice has always been very clear and very decisive when it comes to supporting women, be it young TDs coming in to the Dáil for the first time, or for me, because I didn't have the pleasure of sharing a space with her because she had retired by the time I was elected. But as a councillor that was elected last year, she was immense support, giving me advice, and I saw that going across the divide, be you Fianna Fáil, be you Labour, she always had a word, she always had some advice, and she was there to support all female candidates. And I think that's really important. Now I'll move on to community. Well before Heather was a politician, she worked in her local community. Her affiliation with the credit unions was a huge part. And let me take you back to when the credit union started. These weren't banks. These were community-based savings banks, for want of a better word, groups, that lent money out to people within their community that would not be entertained by a bank. For love or money, they would not be entertained. And this is very important because I myself have heard examples of where somebody has been able, am I seriously only a minute left? Here, I better speed up. But she really brought together people. She lent them money so they could put a bathroom onto their house. She brought people together. She helped them out where nobody else would. That's the Heather I know. When she talks about opportunity, she talks about reaching a hand out, being there, going abroad, talking to people. As I said before, it's easy to talk to your friends, but it takes somebody exceptional to be able to talk to a foe and bring them to the table. Heather has that quality. Now, being presidential isn't always about tea and tea cakes. So we need a person who we can believe will do a good job day in, day out, and will never let the people of Ireland down. Will not necessarily espouse a personal opinion for the sake of it, but will listen and represent you at home and abroad to the best of her ability. As she said, I'm not perfect. None of us are. But I trust in her, and I trust that she will do her very best. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the night.
For a very fine speech, and Connelly on to continue the debate. You hear?
Hi. So, as was mentioned, my name is Leanne Tolentino, and I am a master's student here for teaching in Trinity. I did my undergrad here, so I feel like an old veteran surrounded by people, despite the fact that I might look young. But I would like to start off with the fact that the previous speaker mentioned that it is important for the President to unite the Irish people as a whole, and that it is important for the President to listen to the Irish people. And I'm inclined to agree. And it has been raised by numerous politicians before that Heather Humphries is a good listener, including at the most recent debate for anyone who's watching the news. But I think the way forward for Ireland, the role of President must be one that can handle the issues that are currently facing our society. And listening is not sufficient. While a president obviously does not have powers to do this or that thing, Catherine Connelly very clearly represents a specific faction within Leinster House, and that is the left. And I believe that Catherine Connelly represents a bright future for Ireland, and that future is the way that we deal with these current divides, such as on the immigration issue. Because the immigration issue that has been brought up, we see in the inner city. I lived for most of my life near Dublin South inner city, in Dublin based South, where Vanna Bashik is TD. And now when I walk there, I can see Irish flags all over the place. And there is a clear divide here where the people here believe that there are people here taking their jobs, or that migrants are destroying Irish society. And these people come from the most deprived areas in Ireland, and we need a government that can tackle these issues, and that can only be a left government. We have had a Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael government for the entire history of the Irish state, and that government, the Fianna Fáil government, the Fine Gael government, basically indistinguishable at this point, is what has led to this issue. And I would like to say as well that Catherine Connelly does not just represent a possible bright future for Ireland, but she also very much represents the traditions of this country, right? We are a nation that has witnessed colonialism, famine, and genocide. And as I'm sure you're all aware, there is a genocide ongoing right now in Gaza, and though a ceasefire has apparently been declared, though Benjamin Netanyahu seems to claim that he never actually had the ceasefire go through, he still has to have it signed by government, and he uses that as an excuse to bomb Palestinian people. The people of Gaza continue to starve, they continue to be attacked, and they continue to be bombed. And we need a president. It was mentioned previously, they have a specific power when it comes to international issues for representing us. And we need a president who can represent firmly Ireland's view on this issue, because what is happening in Gaza is a monstrosity, a genocide. And while I know all of the parties in Leinster House will denounce what is happening in Gaza, and I think that is good, it is, however, not enough to just speak about the issue. I would like to remind everyone here today that Catherine Connelly's opponent, Heather Humphries, was a minister for a government, a member of a government that kept on delaying the Occupied Territories Bill and continues to delay the Occupied Territories Bill. And it is absolutely essential that that piece of legislation is passed. And I believe that people should vote for Catherine Connelly, first of all, to send a message to the government that there are certain priorities that we want to be handled. That is, the Occupied Territories Bill must be passed absolutely. That is, that the housing crisis must be solved, that dereliction in the inner cities must be tackled, that the vortex that has arisen that is allowing far-right opportunists to galvanize the inner city in droves must be tackled as well. Because the office of president is one that has been used in the past to tackle as well very important issues such as under Michael D. Higgins, or as mentioned earlier, Robinson as well. And I would also like to mention the fact that Catherine Connelly has been consistent on pushing for the Occupied Territories Bill to be implemented in Leinster House. So when it comes to principles, Catherine Connelly has those principles. Heather Humphries, quite simply, has not during her time in government. Now, obviously, Catherine Connelly has not spent time in government, so there's a difference there, but she has spent her time in Leinster House repeatedly asking about the Occupied Territories Bill. She asked Simon Harris, I recall, in a debate during one of the sessions before about when it was going to pass. And it's also important as well to mention that Catherine Connelly is not just representing a specific view of Ireland, right, of a positive neutrality, of a transformational change. She is also, quite simply, very qualified for the role, right? She has served as the Leisceann Carla. I hope I pronounced that right. I might have mispronounced that. I did ordinary level Irish, I apologize. And she also worked many years as a barrister. So she has the legal experience to interpret the Constitution, but it's not just that. She is also fluent in Irish, and one thing that is very important to bring up is the fact that the Constitution comes in two versions, the Irish version and the English version, and the Irish version always takes precedence. And in fact, we can even cite a historic case for any of the law students out there, politics or history students. In 1982, Patrick Hillary, who was the president at the time, was called multiple times by the opposition, who were requesting that requesting him not to dissolve the Dáil because it would lead to possibly Charles Haughey coming back into power, because the opposition at this time was Fianna Fáil. Now, Patrick Hillary, because it is believed of his understanding of the Irish language, knew that the Constitution meant that he had an obligation to ignore these calls by the opposition, and he asked not to receive any of these calls anymore. So the command of the Irish language is of absolute importance. And Catherine Connelly has that. She has experience as a barrister. She has experience in Leinster House for many years. She also is representative of a transformational change in Irish politics that I believe many people here today would like to see. Everyone here, for the most part, looks fairly young, aside from a few people, I guess. And I imagine many of you know people who would have had issues finding accommodation, had issues as a result of the housing crisis, or if you know people of colour, migrants, have been facing racism on the streets lately in Leinster House. On the streets lately. And what we require to fix this issue is, first of all, President Catherine Connelly, and second of all, a left government. The presidency is only a stepping stone, but it represents our foundational values, and that is why Catherine Connelly should be president. Thank you.
Fine speech, and thank all speakers for what was an excellent debate. Here. While we won't be calling tonight's debate to a vote, we do encourage all of you, if you haven't already, well, the deadline's passed, but please do vote on October 24th and do your civic duties. And we hope to see you next week. Thank you very much.